Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Andrea Weckerly, and welcome to the Ready Living Podcast, where each episode is designed to educate, inspire, and empower you to create the life you want. Thanks for joining us, and remember to subscribe for free on your favorite platform. My guest today is Melissa Rodway. She's a writer, traveler, and observer of human nature based in Toronto, Canada. With a background in journalism and a passion for global exploration, she has spent years chronicling her journeys with humor, honesty, and insight. Her debut book, The People You Meet, is a heartfelt tribute to adventure, connection, and the lessons found far from home. Melissa is also the creator and host of Fly Travel Radio, an adventure travel podcast with over 180 episodes. She has recently dipped her smallest toe into the waters of stand-up comedy. Welcome, Melissa.
It's a real pleasure to be here. I appreciate it.
Your new book is such a wonderful mix of adventure and humor, some of it self-deprecating. For listeners who haven't read it yet, can you give us some background on how you ended up going on that trip, how long you were gone, and what countries you visited during that time?
So the story is that when I was 35, I quit my job and I went traveling with a partner who worked in luxury travel. The purpose of the trip was for him to tour some luxury hotels, to make some business connections, and to explore some different routes that he could use in his own business down the road. I decided that I wanted to tag along on this amazing journey. So we traveled through Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and China. He actually went beyond that, but those were the months that I did. So I was gone for 4 months. And basically, this book, The People You Meet, it came about because for me, I started getting a little bit cagey around week 4, I guess, 3 or 4. I mean, he, of course, had a purpose. He was meeting all these people and I would go along. I met them too. And I went on the hotel tours, etc., when I wanted to. But it's very different when somebody has a real mission and the other person is just literally along for the ride. When we were on these long buses and trains, and sometimes that could be 18, 36 hours, I started crafting these stories in my head about what I was seeing and doing and feeling and the people that I was meeting. Once a week, I would find an internet cafe or a hotel with a computer in it. And I would send these emails that I had perfected in my head home to friends and family. And then they started sending them to their friends and family. And people just loved it. And so I edited it and here we are.
For me, part of the fun of reading the book was seeing how you toggled between luxury accommodations and the simplest of lodgings, some of which sounded like they were barely passable. Many travelers chase comfort and predictability like nice hotels, the usual itineraries and activities, but your book really celebrates the uncomfortable. What's the secret to embracing those moments that feel awkward or even a little scary?
Certainly a few scary or many uncomfortable places. I think, it's temporary. It's part of the experience. It's certainly cheap. So all of those things combined, how often are we hanging out in these rooms? At night, you're going to night markets and you're out all day. And it's really just a place to throw your stuff down and to try to sleep sometimes with one eye open because it can be like that in terms of fear. I'm pretty versatile, so I can do that kind of stuff. But I would say, the extreme of the luxury was very welcome. And I would say it was 10% luxury. On the flip side, I mean, good stories don't come from luxury. The stories come from scariness.
That is absolutely true. And that beautifully comes through in your book. One of the other things that I noticed was that you write hilariously about having to trust strangers when you can't speak the local language. Looking back, was that genuine courage or more of a what's the worst that could happen kind of travel philosophy?
I feel like when you go away, we're always putting our lives into the hands of strangers. If you're going to be someone who goes around the world, you have to lean into that and you have to trust that 9 times out of 10 people are there to be good people and to help you. And you sometimes meet some really interesting people through that. But I have certainly had a few situations. There was one in that book where I was in a car in China We just totally trusted some strangers to drive us to a hostel. It didn't feel like we were going to a hostel at some points. And it was really, really scary. But in the end, we arrived at the hostel. We trust more than we would in our own countries. And maybe that's why we do it, to shed some of our boundaries. I've been very lucky, and I'm going to knock on wood.
Another memorable story was your celebration of the Thai New Year. You called it the craziest 5-day water fight you could ever imagine.
Yes, this is called the Songkran festival. It's a water fight, basically, that goes on and on and on. In some cities, it's bigger than others. It's quite fun. I remember the morning that it started. You can see everybody coming out. They're very excited. They're just like really in the spirit of this massive festival. And then it's just mayhem, spraying you with hoses, dumping literally buckets of water on you. It is nonstop. The first town we were in was Sukhothai, but everyone tells me I'm wrong. So maybe it's Sukhothai. I don't know. But anyways, it started there. We were in the back of Songtaos, which are like trucks that are taxis, and they just attack you. You're soaked. And if you have backpacks and stuff, it's quite annoying. But in Chiang Mai, it's really bad. Chiang Mai is like a university town. The whole city is in on it. And even the tourists get into it and fellow travelers. After 5 days, it's like, you've had enough.
Another thing that I found entertaining, although I'm not sure you actually meant it to be this way, was your description of a 3-day jungle trek in Laos that came with a warning by the tour operators that there would be leeches and bees.
Yes.
And to me, that would be a sure sign that this wasn't the right activity for me, but you went ahead anyway. What possessed you to do that?
It was beer.
Beer, all right. Too much beer.
Too much beer. I don't always use the best judgment. We went up to northern Laos, and part of my desire on this extended trip was that at some point I needed to get some significant exercise in. I'm an active person, and when you're on long buses every day, you don't feel the greatest after a while. So I wanted to do something like a 3 or 4 day trip. So off we went. And there are some beautiful treks in this part of the world, but we just did not do the beautiful trek. We did this awful trek. So we went to this place, we'd had a few beers, and we went to a tour operator in this town, and they said, we'll take you, but we just want to tell you, and their English wasn't great. There might be a few leeches, there might be a few bees, and we were like, whatever, it's fine. We were right in the jungle. It was probably 35, 40 degrees, and there were leeches everywhere. So they would crawl up your legs, up your boots, up your walking stick. They would drop on you from wherever. And my visual of this is the guy ahead of me. He was from Malaysia, and he was wearing shorts and tennis shoes. The back of his legs were covered in blood.
Oh my goodness.
And that's just how it went for like 4 days.
Always wear long pants when you're trekking through the jungle.
Always. And then there were swarms of bees. You just couldn't escape it. And then we would jump into creeks and they would be also full of leeches. It was not a great company we were with. It was scary. And the people had promised us enough water. We ran out of water. And there was nothing beautiful. Sometimes you can do something awful, but at least there's something nice to look at. And there was none of that. People who read this book often say, thank God you did this and I don't have to.
At one point during your travels, you ate durian, which is the so-called king of fruits that's banned in public transportation in Singapore, Thailand, and Hong Kong because of the smell. I found the smell and taste memorable. It wasn't just only the taste, but it was also the texture on my tongue that I'd been warned can stick with you for days. What was your experience like eating it?
Oh, it's disgusting. I think you have to do these things because you're supposed to. And I did it, but no, it's disgusting. So for me, no, thank you. Isn't it funny though, how one culture can think it's delicious? It's like Vegemite for Australians. I don't know if you've had it, but it's awful.
I actually like that, but I didn't like durian. And I was with people who like durian. You wrote in your book that eating street food is an excellent opportunity to people watch. What is it about those street moments that makes them such an essential part of the travel experience?
Street food is where you see the locals. There's so much action, especially I remember in Thailand, because that was our first country and everything was new. In the daytime, it was usually a normal street. And then once it's 5 o'clock, it's completely different. Everyone's throwing little tiny Barbie chairs out and mismatched tables and plates. And it just becomes this whole dining experience. Watching that and watching the servers throwing plates of food at people just as quickly, clearing them away, rinsing them off and loading them up again for the next people, business people, families, friends. It's a really great place to look at culture.
I love the travel tips scattered throughout the book. One is avoid death by coconut, never squeeze the mangoes at the night market, pack a helmet for overnight bus journeys in the countryside, hydrofoil is just a fancy word, always, always take the ferry, and write out your will before scrambling around the crumbling parts of the Great Wall of China.
Let's go to the hydrofoil. That was hell.
It sounded like the way you described it.
We were trying to get to an island in Vietnam and we had to take a ferry. My partner, he wants to get everywhere as fast as he can. He said, oh, this hydrofoil will get us there faster than if we take the ferry. So I didn't even know what a hydrofoil was, but I'm like, whatever, off we go. We get into this boat and he, of course, isn't sitting with me. He gets to ride on the outside across this channel and he's having the time of his life. I am right in the boat. It's kind of sunk deep into the water. It's very claustrophobic. There's person beside person. And I don't get seasick. But even this, it was very wavy, very choppy. There's no air. And all of a sudden, I felt something shift. And it was that everyone was throwing up around me. They had given out garbage bags.
So they plan that people are going to get sick.
They know, yeah. So they handed them out and literally everyone around me is throwing up. I held it together and I looked at the ceiling and I counted down from like 1,000. And then they had a movie playing that was really loud. So I focused on that, but it was really challenging for the old gag reflex. And then when you get off the hydrofoil, everyone is nauseous.
You were saying earlier, people who've read your emails and read your book are saying, well, thank you for sharing this so I don't have to.
I don't know if there's a lot in the book that people would like to do now that you bring that up.
The overall feeling I had after reading this was, I want to have my next adventure, carving out a few select things that I realized probably wouldn't be conducive for me. In many of the stories you share, particularly when visiting poorer areas in the region, you try to find the right balance between expressing a sincere interest in the communities and not wanting to appear voyeuristic. How do you navigate curiosity and respect for people who live in the places you're visiting?
It's a great question. I think sometimes we, as travelers, don't always realize you're in a human zoo until it's too late. One thing that stands out for me is I write about the long neck community that we went to see. So this was in Vietnam, I think, or Thailand. I can't remember. This was something that was suggested to us to do at a hotel. These women whose necks have been elongated due to wearing pounds and pounds of metal around their collarbones to stretch them out. Maybe it was done back in the day for beauty, for protection from animals, for whatever it is that they believed. But when we got back from this village, they said to us, or we learned through the grapevine, that they actually are forcing these women to continue doing this for tourists. And that's when you feel very ill. You don't always know. But I think we all know as humans, you know when something feels wrong. I remember another time, this was in Vietnam, we were on a raft looking at a floating village and it was fascinating. And then something switched for me there too. I looked around and went, oh my gosh, look at all of us white people just staring at these people. This is their way of life. This is all they know. They have very simple means. And it just felt wrong. It was interesting. I learned some things. It was fascinating. But then you have moments where it's like, what if the tables were turned and people are circling my house and looking at me with their jaws open and taking pictures? And I don't know if you've heard of this movie. It's a documentary called The Last Tourist. And it talks about this kind of stuff. It talks about responsible traveling. And part of it is that it's like we go to these countries and for some reason we throw all the rules out the window. We take pictures of children. We go into schools if they'll let us. They said, what if your kids came home from school one day and said, these strangers just came into the school and played with me today and hugged me and did whatever with me? We would lose our minds. And somebody, a stranger or a traveler, started snapping pictures of your kids, we wouldn't put up with it. But when we go, we think we're allowed to do all these things. I would suggest everybody who travels to watch this movie because we're all guilty of it. I did it. I took pictures of kids. I have photos from many years ago. I don't do it anymore.
I think it's a question of visiting other places and definitely other cultures and other countries with a sense of humility and openness and respect.
Totally. The person behind that movie, his name is Bruce Poontip. He did it with a man named Tyson Sadler, but Bruce is the founder of G Adventures, which is a huge travel company. And his motto or saying is always, travel is a privilege, not a right. And it's important to remember that. There's even a segment in this movie about teaching English, which is a wonderful thing to do. But in some cases, in some cultures, you're doing more harm by bonding with these kids for a year and then you leave. And then someone else comes in and then they leave. So you have to question sometimes even things like that. These topics are fascinating for responsible travel.
From a practical perspective, travel isn't always all roses. You had your first airport floor camp out a few years ago, and on one of your trips, which was in January 2023, your car was broken into and your belongings stolen. You shared that via video. What's the best way to manage when things go sideways?
Sometimes those things are hard to deal with in the moment. I think with airplanes, it is what it is. You have zero control and there is nothing that you can do. I watched a lot of Netflix and I slept, so I was fine. But I know that that's not for everybody. But the car thing was very challenging and I was to blame for that, really. I mean, it was very stupid leaving my stuff in the car. Yeah, things can go terribly, terribly wrong. And it does show your resilience. But I also think there's a lesson. So for me, when I had everything stolen out of my car, I was starting a 5-week journey. A couple things happened. One is that it made me re-examine my connection to things and clothes and stuff. I empathize with people in very difficult parts of the world who've had to leave their houses with nothing. And even though I had nothing for a few days or a week where I was, that's not the same.
Yeah, because you had something to go back to.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world. I had money. I went to like secondhand stores and sports stores, and I very quickly replenished the things I had lost. Sometimes these things teach you a huge lesson, and that was my lesson, I think. I mean, I've never been a clothes horse anyway, but it still made me realize how crazy we are in the Western world, about our attachment to stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to shift to some practical tips now. What travel documents should you always carry with you, and do you recommend getting travel insurance?
So obviously your passport. I have this paranoia with passports that somehow mine will always get stolen or lost or someone will take it off my body, even though it's under many, many layers. I struggle with that. I always make photocopies, have pictures in my phone of my credit cards, my health card. In 2023, I took a year off to travel and I got injured twice. Once injured in a gelato shop after 2 months of hiking, cycling, sailing around Europe. I had one too many gelatos, missed a step and sprained my ankle very badly and missed a hiking trip in Italy. So I learned my lesson there that insurance works. It was incredible. And if I hadn't had that, I would have lost a lot. And then I got injured again before I went to Kilimanjaro. So I buy way too much travel insurance at this point. I'm already covered, but then I always buy extra because even credit cards don't always cover things. Read the fine print. I am covered to the hilt. Doesn't cost a ton and you just don't know. Things do happen.
And it's peace of mind too, because if people say it can't happen to me, well, it's happened to you more than once.
It happened to me twice in 3 months. It's very upsetting actually when that happens. And it does happen.
When it comes to luggage, you've said that you're done with wasting time standing around a baggage carousel and will never check a bag again. Does that apply to short weekend trips or also longer ones?
Anything. When I wrote that, I had just bought this amazing backpack, an Osprey backpack that at that time,
40 liter?
yeah, you have it?
I do.
Ah. So when I bought it, it was the exact size of a carry-on and I was in heaven. Since then, I have discovered that that can change from flight to flight to flight. So I have been pretty lucky with that bag, but there's the odd moment where they're like, nope, it's too big and you have to check it. And that's very annoying. But I would say 80% of the time, it's still good. Once you discover that freedom of breezing in and out of an airport, it's a game changer. And so many people are losing their bags now. I don't have time for that. So there's this extra confidence you have when you know your bag is with you at all times. The time you save not standing around a baggage carousel is worth the price in gold, I think.
I went on a 2-week trip 2 years ago, just taking that backpack. I came back with a little bit more. That was a little difficult, but I actually had the right intention of just using the backpack. And it was my first time doing that. And it was in winter. So I was very proud of myself for that. I was very intentional about what I packed, what I thought I would need. I didn't need a new outfit every day, zipped in, zipped out. But you're an expert at that.
Well, I hate packing. And I think that's the other thing. Sometimes it's fun to just live with a few things, simple.
On your website, you offer a couple of travel tips and you mention some things that you think people should pack.
Yes. So compression socks are not always pretty, but I have started to wear them. My sister got a blood clot on a flight once. It is not nice. That I do for long haul flights. You never know when your body is going to decide to do certain things. So let's try to be proactive as much as we can. The Kula cloth is this awesome thing. I interviewed this woman on my show and she designed this thing called the Kula cloth. Basically, it's for women. It's this piece of fabric made of microbial fibers and it's for peeing outside. This thing is awesome. It comes in very pretty patterns and you basically attach it to your backpack. And then if you use it, it folds up so that nobody can tell. And it's much better than either drip drying or using Kleenex and having to deal with that. So I take that thing everywhere. I think it's awesome. Things like that, that make your life easier at all times. I'm all for it. The world is an unpredictable place. So the things that you need, and we're all different, but the things that you know that you need to make yourself comfortable, I'm a big believer in doing whatever you can for yourself.
You also talk a lot about embracing adventure at any age. What would you say to people who feel intimidated by the idea of traveling to a different country or doing something that pushes their limits?
Oh my goodness. Do you know, at this point, all I seem to be meeting are these amazing older people traveling. So I just got back from Italy this summer. I was hiking in the Dolomites. That was the trip I didn't get to do to gelato. So I went back and redid it. I was with a group of strangers and most people were like 69, 70, some were 73. They were in the most amazing shape. They were way faster than I was getting down these mountain trails. And you have to just keep going and doing things. And they all had the heart of a 25-year-old. They were fun. They were interesting. They were great to spend time with. I backpacked in Bolivia with a man who was in his 80s from Australia. Random. He was a doctor. He was incredible. In this book, there's a few older women in there that I kept running into. I think travel is for any age. When you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond, it means something even more than it does in your 20s and 30s. That's the thing about getting older is life in many ways gets better. And I think traveling also gets better. You appreciate things in a different way. I think there's something out there for anybody, no matter what age you are. And it's safer than it's ever been. I mean, the advent of the telephone, of the cell phone is good and bad in the travel world. But the good parts are that it makes life much safer, easier to get around. You can really not get lost anymore. There's a million things you can sign up for. Like if you're traveling by yourself, you can fill a day with a walking tour, a food tour. You can do anything. It's easy. Any age, I think, if you have this spirit of adventure, find what speaks to you and you should go for it.
There's sometimes an assumption by those living in North America that we have a monopoly on what a good life looks like. What are some of the things you learned about other countries during your travels that you think would be good to adopt?
So I love this question. Canada, certainly, that's my experience. I live in Canada, is easy and safe. Everyone is fortunate if they come from Canada. I love being Canadian, but I don't think we have it figured out. So when you go to other countries, certainly countries where they have less, where life is much more challenging, they're way happier than we are. Way happier. We live in silos here. We're too independent here. We don't know how to help each other here. And when you go to see these communities that are living together intergenerationally, and I'm not saying that I would like that either. I didn't grow up that way, but there is something to it. People always surrounding each other and helping each other and working together. There's something to that I think we just don't understand in North America. And I think when you go to these countries, they're way more generous and they're happier. Is probably much more fulfilling than us constantly chasing the next best thing. That can be draining and empty. And I feel like they know much more than we do about how to live.
What destinations would you like to revisit, and which unexplored ones are still calling you?
I try to not go back anywhere more than once, but Mexico, I have a soft spot for, and it's so big. There's always a new place to go. So Mexico, certainly. Central and South America is a place I truly love. I have not yet been to any part of Africa. I have not been to India. Actually, to be honest, Europe is something I'm just discovering now at this age, late 40s, early 50s. I didn't do a lot of that because I was always going elsewhere. And I have a real soft spot for Europe. It's pretty awesome. I've never been to Ireland or Scotland, and I'd really like to see that. But there's also parts of Canada I have not explored fully that are absolutely stunning. I love the east coast of Canada. It's really magical. So there's lots and lots and lots of places I'd still like to go.
Where can people find your book?
It's The People You Meet, subtitle Luxury, Leeches, Love, and Lao Lao, with a host of interesting characters in Southeast Asia. You can find it online. And then Instagram, I'm at fly_travel_media. And I have a website, flybroadway.com. And all my podcasts are there. They're also on SoundCloud under Fly Travel Radio.
Melissa, thanks for having taken the time today.
I loved speaking with you. It's been a real pleasure.